right, so if you have questions, ask. Go to Moderna, go to Baker Brands, go to any of our sponsors. Find that guy, ask him the questions, plug in. Now we're going to something I'm very curious about myself, which is the outcomes of the live scan-to-BIM. I don't even know what that means, but Richard does, and Louis does, and Jason does, right? And Esri does. And they're going to show us how they BIMmed Boukunde. It's a bit of a hack. I don't know. Yeah, let's do it. We also, we pulled it together in a day or two. And the point of that is to show you that it's possible, even though it's rough and ready. It's about useful, not perfect. And I think a lot of BIM work is about useful, not perfect. Useful for someone else, not for you. And everything we talked about yesterday is forward-looking, right? BIM is serving the future, not documenting the past. It's not really about that. So while these guys are figuring out the tech, are you still okay up there? Does it make sense? Any questions? Any questions we can try out now? Hands up. Who wants to ask a question? Okay. All right, then I'm going to hand over to Mr. Richard. Michiel, you don't want to, you want to ask your own question? No, okay.
Richard, how long did it take you to grow that beard?
Okay, they are dumb questions. All right, I'm going to hand over to Richard. I'm also going to join you because I'm curious about this. You guys will sort out your mess and then we will go on.
All right, so how many of you made it down to the basement yesterday to have a look at what we were talking about? Good, less than half of you. So for those of you who didn't make it down to the basement, this is your lucky moment because we're going to be going into a little bit of detail around what we captured around the Boukunde building. So the next 15, 20 minutes, we're going to go through two displays. Now, remember yesterday we had a look at the whole workflow from stage 0 all the way through, remember? And we said right at the beginning of a project, it's essential to get a set of base data, otherwise you can't work correctly. So just to recap on a couple of highlights. Number one, you need to get relevant information that's going to actually be input into your design and planning process. Without context, you're shooting blind. But context can't be drifting in midair. It needs to be anchored down into a proper coordinate system. So the surveying partners explained about absolute accuracy and finding things in the 3D world that we work in. Then we said, because we work in an existing environment of built assets, we need to capture that, and to do that graphically makes a lot of sense. So we're going to show you, and Louis is going to take you through what that looks like and how we went about it. Then later in the sequence, we talked about operations and the fact that computer systems and management systems enable us to have a much more rich experience of what is going on. And from Matthew's conversation as well, data pulls into that environment. So the second half of this slot is going to be looking at an example of what that information looks like. Also down in the basement. So those of you who didn't make it down to the basement, we'll fill that gap. So I'm going to hand over to Louis and take it from there.
Just add all the manual tech here.
Cool, how's it? So I'm Louis de Klerk, I'm the reality capture lead for Zutari. I've also got a very short-lived background in QS and then went over to civil and was a pad marker for a while. So then somehow got from construction because I firmly believed I don't belong in a design seat. So somehow got into the tech. So yeah, I'm not all about the math. I'm more about the tech and the visual stuff. So sorry, Michiel. But I've, in the meantime, seen the light and also now very passionate about information and what the tech can provide us. And those of you that were here yesterday, the camera, will remember that some surveys, when they spoke about it, we talked about coordination. And basically any project where you start, that's the important part. If you get that wrong, everything else is going to be off, everything is going to be in the wrong place. So you really want to start with that. And for Boukunde, that's what we did. So, keeping up with the story, we said, let's digitize Boukunde, let's take it through the process. But we obviously, it's an existing building, one of the 100 billion buildings. So we want to not build a new one, and we want to use this one. So first thing we did is set up control and set it out all across the property so that we've got accurate information and that we can base all of our other information off this. So that control was established, and that's what you would normally find. The moment you go to, sorry if there's a bit of a delay, we're running from here over Teams, it's a whole thing. That's what you'll normally find when you start on Google Earth or OpenStreetMap or whatever, one of these platforms. You'll get some information and you might have a bit of context of where the building is, but you might not have accurate information. So we added to that, firstly, just some drone imagery, just to get a bit of a more recent feel of what is there, and you'll see there solar panels were added. So if we're adding 2 more stories, all of a sudden we've got to consider that. We've got to strip that down first. We've got load shedding. We've got all of these things. How will that impact while we're actually busy with this building? And then we can start to look at it in a 3D environment as well. What does it look like? Hopefully everything refreshes at some point here. What does it look like? What does the facade look like? So we get that context of what's happening here, and we actually start to understand what is sitting at different levels. So this we do with using drones. We explained that yesterday, photogrammetry, so taking a few hundred photos of a building like this in a structured way gives us the results we need. That information gets coordinated with the control that was set out so that we can, again, get this thing accurate in the right place. The next step that we go through is using the laser scanners. So we scanned the Boukunde building. We quickly pushed 2 scanners into the building, and with the handheld LiDAR scanners, the SLAM scanners, we were able to scan this entire facility in an hour and a half. Again, using control marks that were set out on the outside, we coordinated all of that scan data and registered it together. So this one might take a bit more time to load. So there, anybody that hasn't seen a point cloud is millions of points, and especially when zoomed out, it looks very, very rough. But if we get a bit closer, we start to see, and hopefully with internet connections, it will crisp up a bit just now, and you'll start to see more information about what's there. And we get that inside, the inside and outside. We also scan the outside here, so I just want to quickly, this is a live demo, so you'll see how things work or don't work. Unfortunately, the one thing that is quite interesting that we've made happen here is that everything that you're seeing now is running on Esri's platform. It's live, it's in the cloud, as we like to call it. So it's no special software, making it available to our clients, to whoever needs to work with this information or view the information accessible. They don't need a supercomputer to do it, they just need a stable internet connection. So yeah, and then from there we can start to look, and it will refresh now, so I'm going to leave it here, but we can start to look into the hall where we're sitting now, and we can see the chairs, we can see the roof, we can see the screens, we can see all of that information. And capturing that information accurately is the big win here. There's scanners that deliver better point clouds than this, but they take longer to scan. So there's better scanners than this, but then you've got to look at why are you scanning? Do you need accuracy? Do you want the speed, the convenience? There's certain areas where we've been recently working where we're scanning hospitals, and going into a ward, you don't want to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes in a ward with a scanner that you've got to try and move around all the curtains and things. So having mobile devices that can quickly capture something or that it's not complex to use is the big win for us. So yeah, there you can see what that looks like in terms of the scanning, and we can slice and dice through this thing as much as we want. And then at some point after you've now scanned this, and I'm going to take a bit of the rest of the process, but what we've done here, you'll eventually get to a point where you'll actually have a model, which you can then put on your original Google Earth layout, and you can see that it sits in the right place if it's coordinated. And you say, okay, that looks great. That plan is going to work. And with this model, yesterday, can't remember now, somebody talked about the construction side of it. So all of a sudden you go into the construction side and you can actually start to overlay information like the drone cloud, and you can see the drone mesh, and you can see, okay, yes, things are in the right place when we're constructing. We can start to bring in the scans if there's scans during the progress of constructing this building. So looking at these things, seeing that things are in the right place, tracking that construction progress is quite valuable as well. The important thing, and something that Michiel mentioned as well, is that these components and these models actually have properties. They've got detail. So not just a line or a block, but there's actual information linked to it. And that's where the important part comes in. If that stuff is wrong, then when you interact, when you share this model with the next person where they need to work with it, it's not going to work. So making sure that all of the information is correct in these models, it's available to the people that want to view it. If the client wants to view it, if he wants to see information about the light fittings we're going to install or whatever we're going to do, the information is there. Yeah, and we were able to federate all of this information and view it all in one space. So, and that's obviously there's a lot of value in this, and specifically buildings. And then we can actually eventually take this to, let's say campus level or city level, and that's where we would want to go eventually. So one of the challenges that we a lot of times experience, and especially with some of my colleagues that's more not so much building focused, but more on the rest of the disciplines, is that the moment we say the word BIM, so building, build, they go into, oh, it's not applicable to me, it's not relevant to me, I don't deal with buildings, I just design roads, or I design bridges or something else, but it's not a building, so I'm not interested anymore. And for me, that's not really where we want to go. So if you look at something like this is a road section, it's part of the N2 Wild Coast Road, the new N2 that's going to be built leading up to the Msikaba Bridge. Some of you might have seen some stuff in the news that's got massive pillars. It's quite impressive. Go Google that bridge. This was just post-COVID, and we had to figure out how do we do this? How do we now share information with contractors where they can't travel? So when I say post-COVID, just past level 5. They can't travel, there's no places to stay here, there's lodges like an hour's drive from there that's got maybe 3 or 4 rooms, so it's really a challenge. So myself and Richard sat together and we figured it out, and we said, okay, we're going to build a virtual site tour, or a virtual site visit for all of the contractors that now needs to bid on this multi-billion rand project. So again, like I said yesterday, flying cameras is what we're about to get information, so drone wasn't going to cut it here, so we got a plane, hired a plane, got somebody else to fly it, we didn't. And so we fly drones with those pilots. So then we got them to fly this area for us, and we then had some great imagery, and that's all cool, but we also had a design. And what is great about this design is that this design is like, and it's not a model, but it's got the same kind of information. So if we zoom into this and we start looking at it, the contractor can click on a line, if it will click now. And it's also got properties, which is not loading for some reason. You must know when you want to show somebody something, then nothing works. Yeah, now it is not loading. So we're going to have to refresh this thing. Sorry, it's hibernating computers and stuff. So these things also have properties. If you click on the lines normally, they'll tell you it is a 150 mil yellow line, or it'll tell you what the white line is, or that it's a drainage structure, or whatever the information there is. So having that information on a model like this makes it available to the contractors, available to people to see what is going on here. We can, at the same time, the spin-off, what the benefit of this specific thing was as well, that when you start to deal with the community, you can also, they can see how this project affects their property. Because again, like Michiel said, printing out a roll of drawings, it's very difficult to communicate that. If you don't understand a roll of drawings, you don't understand what you're looking at, you don't understand your property's boundaries, how is it affecting your house, how is it affecting your entrance, all of those kind of things. So yeah, you can see there's some properties about that line, which makes it easier for people to understand. We can see where the alignment is changing, where properties are affected, so that guy that owns that house can all of a sudden see what is the effect of this on my life, and how is it going to affect me, making stakeholder engagement, all of those things a lot easier, because those are real challenges in this world at the moment. You try and build anything, and you see how you deal with communities and people that want to understand what are they getting out of it, but also how is it affecting them. And especially in environmental areas like this, where there can be quite a big impact. Do I still have time? Okay, cool. So that's the one part. We can start to look at things like construction monitoring as well. So once you actually get into something, we've added a few more to that 100 billion buildings here. This is the Ford factory. So you've got Ford, the old plant on the left, and the new plant on the right, where they're building the new Rangers. And we also did this and said, okay, well, let's do it. And I'm not going to open every week, because then we're going to be here for a long time. But let's start to look at how does the construction change over time. We can start to compare what was there, what's there now, and we can track information about this. There's one example, but I don't think I'm going to get that loaded up with all of the internet. And over time, we can share this information. The benefit of going visual with this kind of information when you're running a project is you might have clients sitting in different places. So you might have clients like we had here sitting in Japan, in America, and in PE, all involved on the project, and all of a sudden we can collect this information at 8 o'clock in the morning, and by 3 o'clock in the afternoon they've got the latest version available to view, to see what the progress is. When you sit in a site meeting, when you talk about something, when you use things like 3D imagery and you run something like open space, or you've got a scan, or you've got a drone model, that information becomes a visual aid in that meeting. You don't have to take 25 people, try and mosey through the construction to get to a point to see something. You open the imagery and it's part of the record. We've been recently part of projects where there was disputes between us and contractors about work. And our one director there said, that's fine, let's leave it there. And Jaco mentioned this from Open Space, mentioned this yesterday as well. They pulled up the 3D imagery, and the contractors said, it's fine, leave it. Because they knew. So, but it becomes valuable in terms of measurement here, having a viewer like this, having ballpark measurements as a QS to say, you're getting a payment certificate from somebody, being able to log on to something, measure an area and say, clear and grub, yes, it's there. Demolishment of something, yes, I can visually see it. I can see progress of things being installed, and I can pay you for that. And you can verify that without trying to walk around, or stockpile measurements. There's a lot of places where this kind of information, when you start doing construction work and moving into that phase, is valuable, but you need to understand why you're doing this, what information are you capturing, how are you capturing it. So it's about planning. It's not, and this information can get quite a bit of a mess if you don't manage it well, that Dropbox that Richard mentioned. So having a plan of how you're going to store this information, how you're going to transmit this information, what's your environment you're going to store it in. Because if we start emailing these photos around, who's working on what version. So collecting all of the information in one place is where the value in these kind of things sit. I wanted to show you something else, but for some reason, Autodesk is not wanting to sign me in. So yeah. But that's basically my story for today. We're going to flash a QR code onto the screen at some point during this morning. I don't know when it is. But you can scan that QR code. You're going to have a bit of a different version of this viewer that I had on the screen. It unfortunately doesn't have the slicing tool in it, but you can look at the point cloud and navigate through it and look at a bit of the information and just see what it looks like for yourself. And you can try and find some of the modeling mistakes and the things that's there. There is a few fun finds there. We didn't make it. It was just like that. But yeah, thank you very much for your time, and I hope it was interesting.